Everyone. Again, I have no idea why that live just suddenly ended the way that it did. I'm going to attempt this again with Adriana in a hot second, and as we come back to talk about this topic of toxic empathy. It's a bit frustrating when Instagram does that, but hopefully we'll get this working this for another day, but it is what it is sometimes. I'll blame it on Jupiter being in its interesting phase at the moment. Sorry, hello again. We're back.
Hi. Instagram the narcissist. I think we were talking a little bit too much truth and honesty, and the the tech gremlins at Instagram were like, this conversation can't happen.
I completely agree. I think between the flying monkeys and the enabling algorithm, we were abruptly discarded, made
Yes,
a black sheep, and told to leave the social media family.
exactly. We literally just went through the cycle of abuse.
We did, and that's appropriate. And I was going to say that's appropriate for anyone who's been with a narcissist or even someone who's severely avoidant. So I'll tell you what, everyone's relating today to our story.
Hopefully it works this time and we don't get discarded again.
And if we do, guys, we'll reschedule to another day where we're not going to be abruptly taken out of here. But anyways, fingers crossed. Let's try this again. Adriana, who are you and what do you do?
Composed. Composed. I got this. Hi, everyone. I have the giggles now. My name's Adriana Bucci. I am a life coach from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And you're making me laugh.
I I'll rein it in.
Oh my God. And I'm a life coach empowering survivors of narcissistic abuse to heal, set boundaries, and live life on their own terms. I can't stop laughing right now. I'm so sorry. This is so unprofessional, but whatever. Instagram was just unprofessional by discarding us the first time we tried this. I was raised by a narcissistic mother. I had really bad chronic pain for 4 years and then learned about the mind-body connection. Get it together. Thank you. I'm trying my best. Yeah, deep breath. Yes, 100%. And um, yeah, so I healed from the pain by doing the inner work and decided to become a coach and help other survivors of narcissistic abuse. And what we do with my coaching is like we kill two birds with one stone. So you've been narcissistically abused, you've got chronic pain, you're in the right place. So that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, and again, for Adriana's audience, my name is Ken. I'm a counselor based in Sydney, Australia. I focus mostly on attachment related issues, bad breakups, and helping people to become more secure in their attachment. Putting that all to one side, we're here today to talk about toxic empathy. And I really love the definition you were giving before Instagram discarded us last time. So just to throw it back over to you, I'd love to hear that definition again from you because I thought it was really, really good.
I don't even remember what I said, to be honest. But so I would say like toxic empathy. So there's like two sort of nuances to it. Yes, I'm remembering now. Two kind of nuances to it where, you could say that a narcissistic abuse survivor has toxic empathy because they are um, having empathy for the narcissist rather for themselves. But I would not necessarily agree with that because it's like you have been mind fucked. You are in a trauma bond. So you are seeing the abuser as like a good person kind of thing. And so the people that truly have toxic empathy are the enablers and the toxic positivity people where, they'll say shit like, oh, you need to forgive and forget. You need to open up your heart. You need to just be love and light. And, that's your mother. Be nice, blah, blah, blah. And they are, they're having empathy for your abuser rather than for you, who literally just went through this abuse and fuckery that you went through. And like a normal person who has normal empathy and not toxic empathy would like empathize with the person who went through the abuse rather than the fucking abuser, right? Like the way I see it too is just to, I don't think I said this in the first recording we did, but I will add that people in general don't need to have gone through any given horrible thing in order to empathize with somebody, right? So a lot of people will say that, like, oh, like people just, so many people just weren't raised by a narcissistic mother, so they don't understand, and that's why they're enabling and having empathy for, the abusive mother. But the way I see it is like, I have never been in a car accident where I had to get a limb amputated. And if somebody told me that that's what they went through, I would have empathy for them. Like, I don't have to have gone through the horrible fucking thing in order to have empathy for you. And so, what's the double standard with narcissistic parents, right? So I just think that these people with like this toxic empathy that are misguiding the empathy and putting it towards the wrong person, it's not that they just really don't understand. It's that there's something toxic about them for having that toxic empathy. So,
Completely agreed. I think one thing you used last time, which I really liked, was this idea of misguided empathy, in
hmm
that I think a lot of people who are maybe in the position of being a victim in these circumstances may unfortunately say things to themselves like, oh, my narcissistic partner is just going through a bad day.
yep.
And I understand what it's like to be going through trouble at work. I understand what it's like to be stressed out about money, this, that, whatever it may be, instead of actually acknowledging the fact that it's like, hello, I'm being abused and I'm in pain from what this person is doing. And just because someone's having a bad day at work does not mean they have the right to hurt me. Then I
Exactly.
think on the enabling side, we have people who will say things like, oh, well, how could you use labels like, say, that person's toxic? Like, that's just a terrible thing to say. And whilst toxic is a very divisive word and one that I think is misused by a lot of people, sometimes certain people are in fact toxic. It doesn't mean that, we're not projecting. It's just a case of like, no, this person's dysfunctionality is toxic in its impact to other people. And we don't have to gaslight ourselves into saying, oh, well, think about it like this. This person's going through a uniquely difficult position in life. They've got all these issues. And it may be true that they do have all these issues, but that doesn't give a person a right, a explanation. Like, that explanation does not give a person a right to hurt another person. So I think that toxic empathy can come out in that sense. And I also think, too, as we've discussed before, too, when it comes to like the fawn, the people pleasing response, I think people have a tendency to not want to rock the boat with difficult, disagreeable people, and so may resort to being overly generous, over giving, without resorting to boundaries, being like, I don't have to put up with this shit. And I think people struggle with this concept of being a bad person if they were to do that. And I think, as I was saying last time before Instagram kicked us out, was we're all capable of doing crazy shit things, but just because we're capable of it doesn't mean that we actually go ahead and do it. For those people that actually are going out there and doing that stuff, I think that's the people that need to be told, like, listen, what you're doing is not okay. We don't need to hold more empathy for you.
hmm Exactly. And like, if like it's just so ass backwards where people are having empathy for the abuser too, right? Because it's like, okay, sure, they're having a bad day and this is why, they're behaving the way they're behaving, but like we're not 5 years old, you know? And what about what the survivor is going through? What about the person who's literally being abused is going through? Like, are they not allowed to have a bad day? And, the way I see it is like it's silencing survivors by saying that you're not allowed to use the word toxic or use the word narcissist to describe someone who's toxic or a narcissist, right? I've even there's in the narcissistic abuse recovery space, especially on TikTok, it's hilarious. There's these people, I wanted to use a different word, but people who will say that it's ableist to call a narcissist, and it's like, okay, so like how many countries have being a narcissist as like a disability where like they're getting paid by the government to navigate the world because they, miss out on so many opportunities because of this sort of disability. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's another example, I think, of like toxic empathy and like misguided empathy. And the way I see it is that it's not that these people are doing it unconsciously. I think they're narcissists themselves and they just want everyone that's talking about it to shut the fuck up because then we are being ableist by disabling narcissists from getting supply. And if that makes me ableist, then call me Abe.
Yeah, and I to complement that, I also think too that when people are telling others you can't use the word toxic to describe people, I'm like, why?
Yeah,
Do you have an aversion to that word because it maybe is uncomfortable for you to sit with? Have
yeah,
you had history of people using that word to describe your behavior before? I think that, on one hand, yes, there are people who maybe misuse the words like narcissist
sure.
and toxic a lot of the time, and I get that. But equally, on the other side of the spectrum, there are people who have deep uncomfortability with those words. And it's like, listen, if ableism is used to describe people who are discriminating against people who have genuine disabilities, who are not able to access the same level of resources and material that they need in order to function a proper life, I've got to be honest, narcissism is not a form of ableism. Like, I'm sorry, people who are narcissistic are doing far too well in this world.
Yeah,
So I don't even, like, my personal opinion is, I'm sorry, you can't put the two together in that
yeah.
particular context. And frankly, that's just wrong. I was going to say, I don't know about you, but I'm very happy to shift over to some of the examples I plucked out of
Let's do it.
toxic empathy, because I was keen to, just throw these at you and hear your thoughts off the back of some of these, because I think they're well and truly in the realm of what we've
Yeah.
discussed. So, just for everyone's context, these are examples that I plucked off the internet. I'm not going to share where I got them from. I'm not here to criticize the creators. I'm here to criticize the way they've come out and what's been discussed, because the ideas I have problems with, because these are all, in my opinion, great examples of toxic empathy and where things can get it twisted. So, we've got one here, which is, everybody is trying their best. We're all struggling, and when you can empathize with someone's struggles, you can have more care for them too.
That's cute. Like, here's the thing. Everybody is trying their best. I'll give this person that, but we're leaving out the part of what they're doing their best at.
Correct.
So, you know, yeah, a narcissist 100% is doing their best at manipulating you and trying to ruin your fucking life. Nothing to empathize with there. Thank you.
No, and someone who's severely avoidant or severely anxious is doing their best to survive in a relationship by committing to behavior that's actually often very dysfunctional.
Yeah.
Sure, we might leave it to their therapist to empathize with them. That's totally fine. But for the person on the receiving end of this, it can be really, really damaging if the other person is coming out of a place of control, fear, paranoia, and they aren't willing to take any accountability and responsibility for it. Like, as one of my colleagues has said, like, in therapy, particularly with dialectical behavioral therapy, we always teach people, like, it's about, hey, yes, we're doing the best we can, but that's not an excuse to stop. We need to also be thinking consciously about what's the impact of my behavior on other people and how can I continue to work to do better, because it's not about achieving this whole thing of being the best. It's knowing that, on a healing journey, you're progressing. There's no end point. So if someone's just willing to say, like, oh, I'm doing the best I can, I'm like, I'm sorry, but that's not good enough.
hmm Exactly, right? Like sometimes somebody's best is not what you deserve and it's not enough for you. And, it's can be downright abusive in a lot of cases.
Yep, completely agree. I can see here someone was saying how they reckon their toxic empathy was taking a partner back 5 times. And I think that can definitely play into that too, because it can be that whole thing of, maybe they've changed, maybe they've grown, maybe they've gone to therapy and learned something. And as you and I have often said in a lot of our lives, no, like, just no for a lot of these people.
Yeah. And I would say, I wouldn't even say that that's toxic empathy. I would say that like you've been manipulated, and that's not your fault. Like I feel like if we're gonna call it toxic, it kind of like assigns blame,
True.
but like you're not toxic. You've been manipulated by this person. You've been fed these lies that this person has changed, or, they've made you feel sorry for them, or whatever it is. And so you take them back, and it's because they manipulated this sort of emotional state within you, because narcissists manipulate your emotions. And anybody who's in a state of confusion, guilt, fear, shame, false hope, bamboozlement, whatever, they're easier to control. And that was not your fault, right? It's like, you know, if your purse was slightly open and somebody, invaded your personal space and stole your wallet, right? Like that's not your fault, right? And so that's what narcissists are doing with your emotions. They're like poking at them and poking at them and causing you to behave in ways that are not necessarily logical, but when you're in that emotional state, there's no space, like the logic just goes out the window because they have induced those types of emotions that make the logic go out the window and they put you in survival mode and then you end up taking them back, and that's I wouldn't really say that that's toxic empathy. I think it's misguided empathy for sure. And it's trauma bonding too, right? Like, and it's a sign that you need to do the inner work and not to beat yourself up for it.
I would agree with that. I think it is a form of misguided empathy. I think where I would say is that maybe we could call it toxic is if maybe let's take that word out for just a hot second. I would agree that it's misguided empathy in the sense that if you're wanting to welcome someone back who's hurt you out of a place of fear, FOMO, also a fear of guilt that you might be hurting this person, I'd say that's definitely all the ingredients of a trauma bond. I also think that it's a sign that you definitely need to learn boundaries for yourself down the line as well too. Consider how maybe there's an element of people pleasing that potentially could be going on here. But sometimes it's just ignorance. Like sometimes people just don't know any better in these kind of cases. I'm not trying to make excessive excuses. It's just more to say that, look, sometimes people just don't know any better. And I
Yeah.
think that, people almost sometimes need to go through the ringer of this a few times before they're like, now I get it. Because I think people who maybe are more codependent definitely need to take a hard look at themselves and go, why are we addicted to these kinds of people? But not everyone's codependent. So I think it's going to be a case by case basis. But I think if we're putting the word toxic back into it, I think that would be someone who's telling you, just think about that person who's coming back to you for a minute.
Yes.
What are they going through? You shouldn't let them go like that. How cruel would that be to let them go? Because think about what they're
Yeah.
going through. They clearly want to be back with you. They clearly want to spend time with you. How wrong would it be to deny them that opportunity to work on themselves? I'd be like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, just that's that's not only misguided. That is by definition what we call toxic because it's enabling. It
Yeah.
also can be very invalidating to the person who's also probably on the receiving end of this. Like, I mean, if it's, for example, an avoidant breakup where like the avoidant has discarded you and they haven't given you an explanation why. Let's say they ghosted you, for 18 months. And all of a sudden they're coming back to you being like, oh yeah, I was in a really dark place. I was depressed and I always meant to come back to you. I didn't ghost you. And people around you are like, oh, see, they were going through a hard time. Like they were depressed. And it's like, listen, I understand that this avoided person was probably depressed. I totally get that. But your depression is not an excuse to ghost someone
Yeah.
like that. And I mean, if you can't, and to the avoidant who's done this, if you can't handle the fact that you've actually left a person on red for 18 months and not realize that is by definition ghosting, you seriously need to take a hard look at yourself.
Hmm. Exactly. And it's like if it's a one-time thing and, they were in a really dark place and had to be hospitalized or something, maybe we can let that slide. But if it's a pattern, you know what I mean? Not okay. Not okay at all. You deserve better than that. And it's really, I'm gonna sound really life coachy, but like raising your damn standards on like how you're gonna be treated by people. And, really understanding like you have fucking value as a person. And if someone treats you like shit and they ghost you, like I saw a quote a while ago, respect the dead and move on, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I see it. Like if you're gonna ghost, then, see ya. But then there's the people that enable it and it's like, oh, well, they were going through this and then blah, blah, blah. Well, you know what? At the end of the day, we're all adults. People have to figure out their own shit. And if that's their way of figuring out their shit by discarding you, then they need to like work on themselves. And there's nothing you can do to force somebody to work on themselves.
I completely agree. I'd also add to that too by saying that I think if you are going to take time away from someone, what's stopping you from just saying to the person that you're dating, listen, I'm in a really dark place right now. I don't have the capacity to really involve you with what I'm going through, but I look to, reach out to you in a day, a week, a month, whatever it may be, because I think you at least owe it to the person you're close to actually involve them with that discussion as well too, because you can't just make, like, I understand it's your mental health, but you just cannot make those kind of decisions without involving another person like that.
Yeah.
If the context is you're in a otherwise functional relationship where each person is behaving as expected in a relationship that's healthy, and you, the avoidant person, need to take care of your mental health that badly because you are in a really bad place with work, with whatever's going on, fair enough, valid. But at least tell the other person too, because if you're ducking out of a romantic relationship and not involving your partner, that's going to have such a tremendous impact on their well-being, their self-esteem, everything. You just can't do that.
Hmm. Exactly. And like realistically speaking, like in a healthy relationship, if someone's going through like a really dark time, like wouldn't you want to lean on your partner? Like wouldn't you want that person to be there for you? So I just find that like it can be a cop out and an excuse for an avoidant to make an exit or for a narcissist to have an excuse to discard you for whatever reason so that they can, go on to the next supply.
Yep, 100 billion percent. I completely agree. So we've got another one here, which is it's projection to say some people are toxic.
Oh, is that like where some of those like new age people will say like, oh, well, if you see something in another person, that means that you see it in yourself or whatever?
Yes.
Yeah. I just like fuck off, like
It's not even
it's
it's not even projection.
yeah, it's not. It's like your eyes are open. You see the things that are happening and you're calling it out. It doesn't mean that you possess those qualities. I mean, yeah, sure, we all have narcissistic traits, fine. We all have done things that we're not proud of. Absolutely. Like nobody is perfect, but being able to recognize in somebody else that they are being abusive is not projection and like you projecting your own abusive nature onto that person. Like it's kind of like saying like, oh, well, if you don't have your head up your ass and you're ignoring all of the red flags and the horrible things that this person's doing, then you're not woke enough or whatever.
Woke. Yes, that fun word. No, I completely agree. Like, I mean, I like it's totally okay, in my opinion, to have an opinion and a claim, being like, I think some people are toxic. I think some people are narcissists. I think this and that. It's like there's nothing like that's not wrong. And I
Yeah.
mean, going back to an infamous example I've used ages ago, what are we going to do? Call sharks big fish? Because oh no, don't use the word shark. That's discriminating against predators. It's like, but that's what they are. Like, I mean, Jesus Christ. Like, I mean, they survive by eating other fish and, biting people. Yes, they may be misunderstood. I totally respect that. But they're also predatory.
Yes.
Like, two things can exist at once.
Yes, exactly. And narcissists are predatory too. Just because they're not going around murdering people, it doesn't mean they're not predatory, right? And we have to be able to call it out and have language and words and, the proper terminology to use in order to describe a person who possesses narcissistic traits. We need to be able to call that out because like this shit saves people's lives. Like it saves people's mental health. It saves people's emotional health. And like if someone has a problem with that, like I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I don't want to project, but maybe that means that something's wrong with that person who's saying that it's like not okay. But what do I know?
Well, on that note, I've got another one for you. You know, diagnosing people as avoidant or narcissist paints you as a victim, and victimhood makes you angrier.
Okay. So no one's diagnosing anybody. Like we don't have like little checklists and we're not like giving narcissists treatment, first of all. Second of all, narcissist is the correct word to use to describe a narcissist, and avoidant is also the correct word to describe an avoidant. And there are people who have been hurt by narcissists and avoidants who are trying to make sense out of the mind fuck that they just went through. And if that's a problem for, I don't know, these people, I don't want to project my own, whatever onto these people, but yeah, like you gotta wonder like what their agenda is and
Yeah.
the anger part of it. Let's so okay, you're a survivor, you're not a victim because you are alive and you survived it. And you are allowed to be a survivor because that's literally what you are. It's not like, like a narcissist, like a covert narcissist is going to go into that victim mode and be like, oh, poor me, feel sorry for me, da 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 da. No, no. Survivors are empowering themselves. Survivors are arming themselves with information so that they can like not go through this shit again because guess what? Life is too fucking short to spend time on people who are committed to destroying you. And I think people need to be angrier about it. You know?
Yeah.
Like anger is so villainized and like these people who say like, "Oh, it's just making you angry. You're angry. Being angry is bad. Good people don't get angry." It is such bullshit, honestly. Like here's the thing. And this is in my opinion, but again, I don't want to project. But anyone who says like who shames somebody for being angry about something that they literally should be angry for is probably a narcissist because anger is such an important emotion and it has a message for you. So when somebody does something to you that pisses you off, you need to be angry about it. Being angry about it doesn't mean you're gonna go on like some kind of fucked up killing rampage or like do something insane and like, hurt people like a fucking psychopath, right? Being angry means that you are getting in touch with that anger and you're hearing the message that the anger is trying to give you, which is something on the lines of a boundary was crossed, something not okay happened here, and I'm not going to put up with it.
Yes, to everything that you just said. I find anger can be the emotion of justice. It can be
Yeah.
that emotion of realizing I have been wronged. I am not okay with this. And I think people conflate anger with frustration and rage, and they're not the same emotions as well, too. It would be projection to say something like, all avoidants are just emotionless and they're just terrible human beings. They're never going to be able to work through it and they're all fucked up people. It's like, well, that's just factually
That's
wrong.
narcissists.
Yes, that's narcissist. I'd say factually it's definitely narcissist. But like not every avoidant is going to be like that. Like projection is when you conflate a lot of your rage and say things like, well, I just think every male out there who's straight is toxic. You can't trust a man because they're all terrible. And it's like, what you're feeling there is frustration. Maybe a bit of anger there too, fair enough. But that's not a healthy way to express that because that's just wrong on so many accounts as well too. There are some men who probably have caused a lot of hurt and pain for you, and that's totally valid. And I think that being angry about that, there are ways to do that in constructive ways. On the flip side, and I see this a lot with new age, particularly straight male influencers and coaches, are the ones who go on being like, oh, well, toxic masculinity isn't a thing because masculinity can't be toxic. And I'm like, I can tell you now as a male who may not be straight, but I can tell you I have done some toxic shit that's come from a very masculine side. And I can tell you, we have the capacity to be very toxic. Now, if you've got an issue with that word, you should probably take a look at yourself and what you aren't able to, work through.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even know what to add to that. But yeah, like, yeah, it's, yeah, there's the people that are just like angry about whatever and, painting people in like the same light, but like maybe they just need to vent, but maybe they're venting to the wrong person, right? And then there's, the anger that comes with like an injustice was done to you. And I want you to feel angry about that because then you're going to get the message from that anger that like something not okay happened here. But when you're dealing with a narcissist in particular, and they do something to piss you off, because let's face it, they piss everybody off. Like anything that they would do would piss any rational person off. And then they tell you, oh, you're so angry. You're unhinged. You can't be angry. You're overreacting. You start repressing that anger. And then when you repress the anger, you miss out on the message that something not okay happened here. And then you're under their control.
Yep, and you don't heal.
Exactly. So get
Yeah,
angry, everyone,
anger is a
in a
very
healthy
healthy.
way.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't think being keyboard Reddit warriors is a good idea in the long run. If you're going to have a phase of that, whatever. Like, I mean, I'm not going to judge that. But I think that there are healthier ways, ideally with a journal or a therapist who's able to hold space for you, or a friend who can validate the frustration you feel, because that frustration needs to be processed and felt, and it's very valid. But don't expect to heal if you don't access some of that necessary anger that you feel inside of yourself. All right, I got another one. Our open hearts open other people's hearts.
Okay, cool. Do they now?
Trauma would say otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. When we are traumatized and we open our hearts to the wrong people, we are a wonderful target for an abuser.
Yep,
Just
yep,
saying.
yep, yep, yep. And also, I'm as someone who works with a lot of people who have tremendous fear in receiving love. Like, I mean, okay, I may not love the phrase "you need to love yourself in order to love another person," but I gotta say there is one element of major truth to it, and that is particularly for people with an avoidant attachment, particularly those who have like very severe trauma. So many people, like, okay, classic example that I think a lot of people will relate to. You know, if someone were to say to you, you know, like, oh, I think you're beautiful, I think you're smart, I think generally some people who might struggle with receiving compliments would say things like, oh, I don't know if that's true. People with a severe avoidant attachment style are very allergic to receiving genuine kindness and love. And people who are extremely anxious can similarly be in that category too. But you got to understand that you being open, vulnerable, kind-hearted, compassionate can be like having an allergic reaction in the other person. So, and even people who are narcissists don't often do particularly well with any of these forms of compassion and kindness all of the time, because they may view it in you as weakness. So, as you said, being open hearted doesn't mean you're necessarily going to elicit the same in the other person. In fact, it is naive to think that your positive qualities will do the same for another person.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you cannot love someone enough to make them not treat you like shit if they have an agenda.
Or if they're super traumatized.
Yeah, exactly. And like the thing is, if they're super traumatized, they have to figure that out for themselves, right? Like you cannot force somebody to heal.
No.
You know, they have to make that choice for themselves. And if they're choosing not to, there's nothing you can do about it. It's, you know, there's no amount of love that you can throw at a person that is going to fix them or help them or convince them that, you know, they need to make a change in their life. Like, usually people have to like hit that rock bottom where they make that decision for themselves because it's just not working for them. And for some people, they never reach that point in their lives, and that's their journey. And part of the radical acceptance that we were talking about earlier, that's a huge part of healing where you just radically accept that, like, okay, I'm on my journey, you're on your journey. It is what it is.
Yes. So I think that phrase, you can't love someone until you love yourself, is not entirely accurate. I'd say you can't love unless you're willing to accept love from another person as well too. And I think a lot of people struggle with that acceptance
Mhm.
piece.
Yeah, 100%.
So back on the examples that we have here, I've got another one here, which is magic happens when we learn to see all the unmet needs that we and they are presenting beneath the unskillful things we say and do.
Like, what? Like that what like that my brain hurts from here. Like I don't even Yeah.
I don't even know what that one was saying. Like,
I don't know.
I think that what they were trying to say in that one was when we're in conflict with someone, if we finally learn to understand someone's unmet needs, perhaps we will be able to relate better to the other person. And I'm going to throw the keyword context to that word because what I'm noticing, particularly about a lot of these examples, is how absolutist they are. It's almost like, well, if you do this, then this surely will be the
Yeah.
result. It's like, no.
Yeah. It's
Because,
almost like it's saying, be a people pleaser, overextend yourself, fulfill the emotional needs of everybody because you need to be a people pleaser and like completely fuck up your mental health and, just don't even pay attention to your own needs.
yeah. And on that note, I've got another one which relates to this, which is validation never failed to transform a conflict.
This person did not deal with a narcissist, did they?
No. Well, they were too busy telling people not to use that word or to also
Exactly.
not use the word toxic. So it's like, okay, well, I guess we're just going to acknowledge everyone here with love and light.
Exactly. Oh, the love and light fairies.
Yeah, I feel like they haven't left Neverland yet, so it is a bit of a problem. But yeah, just on that note, I want to say, like, please understand that yes, it's important to validate people's emotions, but also bear in mind too that, and I'll speak this as someone who works in a space full of compassion and compassion fatigue. One of the quickest ways to burn out is when you are validating someone over and over and over again, and it's not being reciprocated. When you don't have someone who's able to also take ownership of their side of the street, you will hit burnout real damn fast. And I can tell you, validation will quickly turn to depression.
Yeah.
So please bear in mind that, yes, it's true, we all deserve degrees of validation, we all deserve to be loved and nurtured. But if in conflict you're dealing with someone who's taking advantage of your validation without looking to do the same, you are in a one sided relationship.
Exactly. Exactly. And honestly, like one of the most important skills that someone can learn on their healing journey, which can take some time, especially, if you're traumatized and you've been narcissistically abused and you've been gaslit for years, decades, your entire life, is the ability to validate yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, rather than seeking external validation. But that's something that can come with time. But I just feel like for people who are not trying to take advantage of other people but are looking for validation, they're not getting that validation from people at the detriment of that person. Whereas, a narcissist is constantly seeking validation at the detriment of the people that they're seeking the validation from.
And that doesn't mean that if they're getting that validation that they'll change. Like I've worked with some people before where frankly they need an entire team supporting them because they weren't happy with just my validation. They needed tons of it.
Mhm.
There are some people in life who frankly need a lot of hand holding and support. And you've got to know your limits because
Yeah.
you can't just be a bottomless bucket of empathy and support for some people because it's just unhealthy. So you've got to be very mindful of where you're giving that validation to and also pouring back into yourself as well because as people who are naturally givers, people who are more likely to be on the receiving end of these one-sided relationships need to learn to have big boundaries over being too giving to people who aren't reciprocating.
Hmm. Exactly. Exactly. Like reciprocation's huge, right? Like if you're pouring and pouring and pouring and pouring into somebody and you're not getting anything back, like it's not like, a what's in it for me kind of thing, but like it can't be one-sided. And that's where you're gonna burn out and you're going to, you know, it's not gonna go good.
No, you'll quickly turn into the very people that you don't want to turn into at that point. So great, great thing to learn is not to do that. Okay. Do we have, I was going to say, we probably have time for a couple more and then we can
Yeah,
round out.
sounds good.
I got another one here that it's one with labels. The label I give you is simply never the truth. Never. As it validates my very real experience of our dynamic while wholly invalidating yours.
Like that just sounds like word salad to
I
me.
was thinking the same thing as well too. Like to me, it's sort of in the realm of like word salad and just complete gobbledygook.
Yeah, like it's confused, like it's just confusing, and confused people are easier to control. So, not to project, but maybe this person has an agenda.
Funny that. Yeah, I completely agree. I think that like this kind of language, like to me, I consider myself a smart person, but when I hear this sort of stuff, my brain goes, "What?"
Yeah,
Like,
it's
I
like
mean,
they're trying to sound smart,
correct.
And then
And,
it's just like, huh?
and I think people have got to be really mindful of this sort of stuff because, I mean, on paper, it sounds, it sounds very positive, airy fairy. It sounds very like nice to be like, we shouldn't use, labels as a way of talking about another person's experience because what about what they're going through? Great, save that for their therapist because if you're on the receiving end of this crap, you can definitely use a label to be like, frankly, this experience feels like I'm dealing with a narcissist, as someone who's severely avoidant, anxious, whatever, because it's your reality.
Exactly. And like, you know, labels are kind of important. They're not like, don't put the label on a pedestal, but if you were looking for shoes and there was no word for shoes, and then you're just like walking around with no shoes and you're wondering why your feet hurt so much because you don't know what shoes are. So you just continue to suffer for the rest of your life because you don't know what the word for shoes is and you don't know what to look for. Works the same way with the word or label narcissist, right? Like we speak in languages for a reason, in my opinion. Like, you know, yeah, like words have meanings for reasons and they are useful. Like, I don't know. It just sounds so stupid, but like, yeah, words mean things, guys.
I completely agree. And I think if someone struggles with that, with either assigning a label or even holding on to a label, like, I mean, it really is for each person to figure out why that actually is. They shouldn't be projecting that onto other
Yeah,
people and being like, you can't use labels. Well, guess what? I fucking can. So I guess you better get used to feeling like you can use it too. Because I feel very comfortable using it for myself every now and then, being like, oh yeah, I've got patterns of narcissism, I've got patterns of this, that, or the other, and I can rein it in. I
yeah,
know for a fact that I'm not someone who's going out getting my jollies off by making someone else's life miserable. So,
exactly.
it is what it is. All right, last one, and this is a good one. I think you're going to have a good reaction to this. Someone's unwillingness to change is a very natural expression of someone experiencing deep shame over what they're going through, and it will obviously take them a while to navigate what they're working through.
Okay. So let them go in their own little corner of the miserable universe they've created for themselves and not change. Like, go for it. Power to you.
Yep, you got to understand that, like, yes, some people take a snail's approach to change, and look, to each their own, fan fucking tastic. But like playing, a game of tennis with a beginner where you're at an Olympic level, you may find that you're not able to enjoy that game of tennis if you're with a beginner.
Yeah, exactly. Right? And like, you know, defining change too, right? Like, not everybody needs to change, you
No,
know? Like, there's so many people that have been changed as like not a choice because of the abuse that they went through, because of people who refuse to change their abusive ways. And that's, you know, if someone's refusing to change their abusive ways, that's a fucking problem.
yep, agree.
Because, they're going to keep destroying people that don't deserve it. Because no one
Yep.
deserves it.
And also, just to wrap up my piece here, like, you don't have to wait for someone who's abusive to change.
Exactly.
Like, I mean,
They
you
won't
know,
change.
are you willing to put up with that amount of pushback and friction just to see someone, finally get it together to actually be on the same page as you too? Like, I mean, I think it's one of those things where, as someone beautifully said, it's not necessarily their fault, but it is their responsibility. Like,
Yeah.
absolutely agree. Like, it's no one's fault for where they are, why they're here now. But at the end of the day, it's your baggage. And you've got to unpack that so it doesn't keep impacting not only yourself, but people you're going to get close to.
Exactly. You know, and it's like, you know, the way I the way I saw it when I was like first starting my healing journey and like learning about all this stuff, it was like, oh, so like I just internalized it and destroyed myself like a normal person, whereas a narcissist externalizes it and destroys other people because like they suck that much. So,
Yep. I completely agree. And I think it's one of those important things. It's what I mentioned last week in my live is people are going to be so mindful of the actual projection they're getting from other people as well too, and the gaslighting, because it's so easy for people to internalize and take a lot of this stuff on, think it's theirs, and just feel such unnecessary shame that wasn't theirs to begin with. Anyways, I have to run because I got to get to my next appointment. But just want to say, as always, it's so good seeing you and chatting about these
likewise.
wonderful examples of toxic empathy.
So much fun, and we'll definitely have more conversations about this. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Oh, lastly, Adriana, if people want to find you, where can they find you?
Let's get your shift together. All one word, shift with an F, on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, etc.
Phenomenal. Thank you, as always, for joining. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you for being part of this live. And Adriana, I'm sure I'll see you again very soon. Bye,
Totally.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.